Imagine a war so devastating, it reshaped an entire continent. A conflict that raged for 3 decades, blurring the lines between religion, politics, and sheer survival. This was the 30 Years' War, a brutal, sprawling struggle that claimed millions of lives and forever altered the map of Europe. How did it all begin? How did it spiral from a local religious dispute into a continental catastrophe? Today, we're diving deep into one of the most destructive conflicts in human history. We'll explore the spark that ignited the flame, the legendary figures who rose and fell, and the peace that finally, after 30 long years, brought about the birth of the modern world. To understand the 30 Years' War, we first have to journey back to the early 17th century, to the heart of Europe, the Holy Roman Empire. Now, the name is a bit misleading. It wasn't really holy, it wasn't Roman, and it certainly wasn't a unified empire. It was a patchwork quilt of hundreds of states, principalities, and cities, all under the loose authority of the Habsburg emperor. The real power lay with the local princes, and they were bitterly divided. The Peace of Augsburg in 1555 had tried to solve the religious problem by declaring Quis regio, ius religio, whose realm, his religion. Basically, the local prince decided if his territory was Catholic or Lutheran. But this was a temporary fix. It didn't account for Calvinism, which was spreading rapidly, and it created a tense, fragile balance of power. Both sides, the Catholic League and the Protestant Union, were stockpiling weapons and staring each other down, just waiting for a reason to fight. That reason came on May 23, 1618, in the city of Prague, the capital of the Kingdom of Bohemia. The new king of Bohemia, Ferdinand, who would soon become Holy Roman Emperor Ferdinand II, was a staunch, uncompromising Catholic. He started rolling back the religious freedoms that Bohemian Protestants had enjoyed for years. The Protestant nobility was furious. They marched to Prague Castle to confront the king's representatives. Tensions boiled over, and in a dramatic act that would become legendary, the enraged nobles seized 2 of the royal governors and their secretary and threw them out of a castle window, a staggering 70 feet down. This event is famously known as the Defenestration of Prague. Miraculously, all 3 men survived the fall. Catholic propaganda claimed angels had caught them, while Protestants joked they landed in a massive pile of horse manure. Survival aside, the act was a symbolic and literal slap in the face to the emperor. The Bohemian revolt had begun, and the first phase of the 30 Years' War was underway. The Bohemian rebels didn't waste any time. They deposed Ferdinand and offered the crown to a Protestant prince, Frederick V, but they were outmatched. The forces of the emperor and the Catholic League, led by the formidable Count Tilly, were better organized and funded. In 1620, at the Battle of White Mountain just outside Prague, the Catholic army crushed the Bohemian forces in a battle that lasted only about an hour. Frederick, mockingly nicknamed the Winter King for his short reign, fled. The aftermath was brutal. Protestant nobles were executed, their lands were confiscated, and Catholicism was forcefully reimposed. For the first decade of the war, it seemed like a complete victory for the emperor and the Catholic cause. They pushed north, occupying Protestant lands and asserting imperial authority. But their very success was about to draw new, more powerful players onto the stage. Watching the Catholic Habsburgs' growing power with alarm was King Christian IV of Denmark, a Lutheran nation. Fearing the emperor's ambitions would soon threaten his own kingdom, and wanting to champion the Protestant cause, Christian invaded northern Germany in 1625. This marked the Danish phase of the war, but once again, the imperial forces proved too strong. The emperor had a new, brilliant, and ruthless commander, Albrecht von Wallenstein. Wallenstein raised a massive private army, loyal only to him, and he and Count Tilly systematically defeated the Danes by 1/6/29. Christian was forced to sue for peace and withdraw. The Protestant cause seemed utterly lost. The emperor issued the Edict of Restitution, demanding the return of all church lands seized by Protestants since the 1550s. It was a massive power grab that terrified not just the remaining Protestants, but also many Catholic princes who feared the emperor was becoming too powerful. The stage was set for another intervention, this time from a true military visionary. From the north, a new champion entered the fray, King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden. Bankrolled by France, who we'll get to in a moment, Gustavus landed in Germany in 1630 with a new kind of army. He was a military genius who revolutionized warfare. He introduced lighter, more mobile cannons that could be moved during battle. He trained his infantry in volley fire, creating a continuous stream of bullets. And his soldiers were well-disciplined, highly motivated professionals, not the usual mercenaries. He was called the Lion of the North, and he swept through Germany like a storm. At the Battle of Breitenfeld in 1631, he shattered Count Tilly's supposedly invincible army, a stunning victory that revitalized the Protestant cause. Gustavus Adolphus seemed unstoppable. He won victory after victory, pushing deep into Catholic territory. The tide of the war had dramatically turned. It all came to a head at the Battle of Lutzen in 1632, where the Swedish army faced Wallenstein's imperial forces. The Swedes won the battle, but at a terrible cost. Gustavus Adolphus, leading a cavalry charge at the front, was killed. The Lion of the North was dead, and the Protestant cause had lost its greatest champion. With the death of Gustavus Adolphus and the assassination of Wallenstein shortly after by a suspicious emperor, the war entered a brutal, grinding stalemate. Both sides were exhausted, and Germany was a wasteland. This is when the war's final, decisive shift occurred. Up to this point, France, a predominantly Catholic country, had been quietly funding the Protestants, first the Danes, then the Swedes. Why? Because the French chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, was a master of realpolitik. He cared less about religion and more about power. His greatest fear was a strong, unified Holy Roman Empire ruled by the rival Habsburg dynasty, which controlled both Spain and the empire, effectively encircling France. Richelieu's motto was raison d'etat, or reason of state. For him, weakening the Habsburgs was more important than Catholic unity. So, in 1635, France officially declared war and entered the conflict directly. This transformed the 30 Years' War. It was no longer a religious war between Catholics and Protestants. It was now a political struggle for European dominance, primarily between the French House of Bourbon and the Austrian and Spanish Habsburgs. The final phase of the war was the longest and most destructive. With foreign armies fighting endless, inconclusive battles on German soil, the sheer devastation is hard to comprehend. The war wasn't fought by massive state-funded armies as we know them today. It was fought by mercenary armies that lived off the land. When they entered a town or village, they would loot everything: food, livestock, valuables. What they couldn't carry, they destroyed. Disease and famine followed in their wake. Entire regions were depopulated. Some estimates suggest that the population of the Holy Roman Empire dropped by as much as 40% in some rural areas. It was a generation of unimaginable suffering where civilians bore the brunt of the violence. The war had lost all of its initial religious purpose and had devolved into a chaotic, desperate struggle for survival. By the 1640s, everyone was exhausted. Treasuries were empty, the lands were barren, and the people were broken. Everyone wanted peace. Finally, after 5 years of painstaking negotiations in the German region of Westphalia, the warring parties signed a series of treaties in 1648, collectively known as the Peace of Westphalia. This wasn't just a peace treaty. It was a complete reordering of Europe. Territorially, France and Sweden gained land, and the Dutch Republic and Switzerland were officially recognized as independent nations. Religiously, the treaty expanded the Peace of Augsburg to include Calvinists, and it established a new principle of religious tolerance. But the most profound change was political. The treaty shattered the power of the Holy Roman Emperor, giving the individual German states virtual sovereignty. They could now choose their own religion, sign treaties, and form alliances. This ended the dream of a unified Catholic empire in Central Europe. The Peace of Westphalia is often considered the birth certificate of the modern international system. It established the principle of state sovereignty, the idea that each nation has the right to control its own affairs without outside interference. The age of religious wars was over, and the age of nation-states had begun. So what can we take away from this 30-year nightmare? The war was a brutal lesson in the dangers of religious intolerance and the devastating consequences of mixing faith with politics. It started with a dispute over faith, but ended as a raw power struggle that cost millions of lives and laid waste to Central Europe. Yet out of that destruction rose a new world order, one based on sovereign states and the balance of power. the very system that has shaped international relations for the past 350 years. The 30 Years' War stands as a grim reminder of how quickly conflict can spiral out of control, and how the search for peace can lead to the creation of a whole new world. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through one of history's most complex and consequential wars. If you found this fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the events that shaped our world. Let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to see covered next. Until then, stay curious.